Her beta parents sold her because of infertility until the alpha rancher chose her. The day my parents sold me, the sky looked gentle. That's the part I can't forgive. Not the heat, not the men who came with papers and guns, but that the sky stayed soft and blue, as if mercy could exist without consequence. Mama had braided my hair that morning, said it was for dignity. Her hands shook more than mine. "You're not to cry," she whispered. "You'll shame us." I bit the inside of my cheek and nodded. I was 21, not a child, though I still felt like one standing barefoot in the dirt while the men talked about money as if it were cattle being weighed. My father, Jonas Reed, signed the paper with a quill that left a blotch by his name. He didn't look at me. His jaw worked like a man chewing on bitterness. The man who bought me, Mr. Calder, wasn't cruel, not in the way men in stories are. He was just empty, the kind of man who saw women the way others saw livestock. Useful until proven otherwise. When I'd first been courted years back, folks said I'd make a fine wife. Calm, quiet, polite. Then came the fever that left me weak for months. Afterward, the doctor said something I never forgot. The body heals, but not always the way you want. She may never bear children. That word, never, followed me like dust on boots. In a town where women's worth was measured by their womb, I became something less than whole. So when my parents' debts grew and Mr. Calder needed a companion for his ranch, the arrangement was made without much argument. I didn't fight it. I didn't know how to. The wagon ride to Calder Ranch was 3 hours through dry prairie. The man barely spoke. He offered water once, then looked at me with the same appraisal he gave his horses. "You'll do what's needed," he said finally. "Keep the house. Cook. Don't ask questions. I ain't a patient man." I nodded again. My throat felt carved out of dust. By nightfall, I was in a strange bed that smelled of oil and hay. The stars outside were sharp, almost cruel in their beauty. I remember thinking maybe God had left this part of the world, left it to men like Calder and women like me who forgot what it felt like to belong. A week later, he left for town and didn't come back. The hands whispered he'd gone to gamble. Maybe he'd gone broke. Maybe worse. No one asked about me. Not really. I kept to the house, cooking for the ranch crew, washing, pretending the quiet didn't scare me. And then one afternoon, a man rode in through the front gate. He wasn't Calder. He was taller, broader, the kind of presence that filled space without trying. Dust coated his boots, his coat, even the dark brim of his hat. Yet his eyes were clear, grey as rain. He dismounted slowly, gloved hands steady, gaze fixed on me as if he'd known I was there all along. "You the one Calder bought?" he asked. His voice wasn't cruel, just low and certain, like someone used to being obeyed. I straightened my apron. I was. He's gone." He studied me for a moment longer. "Gone where?" "I don't know. It's been 6 days." He looked toward the empty barnyard, then back at me. "Figures." I didn't ask what that meant. Instead, I asked, "Who are you?" He removed his hat then, revealing sun-bleached hair and a scar cutting clean across his left eyebrow. "Name's Eli Graves. Calder sold me this ranch 2 months ago." My breath hitched. Sold him? The ranch? He nodded once at my expression. "You can stop looking like a ghost, miss. You're not property anymore. Whatever deal that man made, it's over." For a long moment I couldn't move. Freedom wasn't something you just received. It had to be believed. And belief takes time. Eli didn't ask questions that first day. He didn't pry or stare or treat me like a broken tool. He just walked the property, checked the fences, and spoke to the ranch hands like they were men and not shadows. That evening, he returned to the porch where I sat peeling potatoes by lamplight. "You can stay here till you figure things out," he said. "I don't take advantage of the lost." "I'm not lost," I said quietly. He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then what are you?" I didn't know how to answer. So I said the first truth that came to me. "I'm waiting to remember who I was." He tipped his hat again and went inside. That night, for the first time since I'd left home, I slept without hearing chains in my dreams. In the weeks that followed, I learned Eli Graves wasn't the kind of rancher Red Hollow gossiped about. He was quiet, but not cruel, stern, but not cold. He had an old injury in his right shoulder, a bullet wound from a cattle raid years back, and he worked through it with a grim patience that made me want to understand pain differently. The men respected him the way men respect storms. Not because they want to, but because they know resistance is useless. He let me help where I could. The books, the meals, the garden. And slowly, silence became something softer between us. One morning, I was hanging laundry when he came up behind me, holding a basket of feed. His sleeve brushed mine as he passed, and something small sparked beneath my ribs. Something dangerous and human. "Didn't figure you for staying this long," he said. "I didn't either." He paused. "You got someone looking for you?" "No." He looked at me then, properly. "Then you got no one owning you neither." There was no pity in his tone, just fact. But it was enough to make me look away before he could see the tears I hadn't meant to shed. Nights in Red Hollow were long, but the ranch light glowed warm against the dark. I started reading by the window. Eli had a small shelf of books, mostly ledgers and old poetry volumes his late sister had left. I read Emily Dickinson by firelight while the wind rattled the shutters. Once he caught me reading aloud and didn't move for a long time, just listened. "You like words," he said finally. "I like what they do when the world's quiet." He nodded, eyes softening. "Ain't much quiet in this life. You better keep it safe when it finds you." But peace doesn't stay long on frontier soil. Not when men think they can own women like land and cattle. 2 weeks later, Mr. Calder came back, drunk, furious, claiming the sale had been a misunderstanding. Eli met him at the gate before he could reach the porch. "She's under my roof now," Eli said, hand on his revolver. "Whatever deal you think you made is null. You sold me this ranch, remember? You don't own a damn thing here." Calder sneered. "She's mine, paid fair." I stood on the porch, my pulse roaring in my ears. "You paid for silence, not for me." That made him stumble, just enough for Eli to step forward, voice low and final. "Get off my land." The world seemed to still. The ranch hands froze, watching. Calder's mouth opened, closed. Then he spat at the dirt, turned his horse and left. Eli didn't look back until the dust settled. "You all right?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "You risked your life for me." He shook his head. "No, for what's right." But later that night, when I thanked him again, he only said, "Don't mistake protection for kindness, miss. I don't need thanks. I just don't like seeing people treat like property." And maybe that's when I started to fall in love. Not with what he said, but with what he didn't. Because men who don't speak their hearts are often the ones whose actions tell the truest stories. Eli didn't mention Calder again. Neither did I. But something between us had shifted. A quiet understanding. Unspoken, yet felt like the weight of rain before it falls. He gave me my own space in the ranch house, a small room by the east window, overlooking the fields. Sometimes at dawn, I'd watch him through the glass, shoulders bare, shirt slung over one arm, working with the horses before the sun had fully climbed. He moved like the land had taught him how, steady, without waste, and every time he paused to stroke a mare's neck, that gentle patience stirred something fierce in my chest. I wasn't used to men who touched anything gently. One evening, while preparing supper, I heard thunder rolling low beyond the ridge, the kind of storm that came with wind and consequence. By nightfall, the air was thick, restless. The ranch hands had gone home early. Eli and I were alone in the house, the lamps flickering. He was fixing the window latch when I asked, "You ever afraid of storms?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Used to be. My mother would count between thunder and lightning, said if the count reached 10, we were safe." I smiled faintly. "And now?" "Now I reckon safety's a story folks tell to feel less small." I wanted to answer, but a crash of thunder swallowed my voice. The wind howled, the lamp went out. I gasped. He was beside me instantly, steady hands finding mine in the dark. "Easy," he said softly. "Stay still." His thumb brushed across my wrist, rough, calloused, real. And just like that, the fear ebbed away. Lightning flashed through the window, catching his face for a heartbeat. His eyes, grey and endless, held me still. Something passed between us then, a current older than the storm outside. "You should sit," he said, his voice rougher now. "I'll check the barn." I caught his sleeve before he could move. "Don't, the wind's too strong." He looked at where my hand clutched his arm, then at me. Neither of us moved. When he finally spoke, it wasn't about the storm. "You trust me that much already," I swallowed. "You've given me no reason not to." For a long time, he said nothing. Then, almost reluctantly, "That's a dangerous kind of trust, Miss Reed." "I'm not Miss Reed anymore," I whispered. "That name died the day my parents sold me." His gaze softened, the hard lines of his face easing. "Then what should I call you?" I hesitated. "Lena. My middle name." "Lena." He said it like he was testing how it fit in his mouth. Careful, reverent. Another flash of lightning, and this time neither of us looked away. We spent that night sitting by the fire after he got it relit, the thunder still rumbling but softer now. He poured 2 small cups of whiskey. Not much, just enough to steady nerves. "You ever think about leaving Red Hollow?" I asked. "Once," he said, "when my brother died. I didn't know he had a brother." "What happened?" "Raid," he said simply. "Bad winter. He took a bullet defending what wasn't worth dying for." He turned the glass in his hands. "I promised him I'd make something honest out of this land. Still trying." The firelight danced across his face, catching the faint scar beneath his jaw. I wanted to reach out, to touch, to understand, but I didn't. Some silences deserve respect. Days passed, then weeks. Calder never came back. Word spread that he'd lost everything gambling in Casper. No one mentioned his name again. Eli hired new hands, rebuilt fences, planted winter wheat. And I learned how to live again. I learned to ride, awkwardly at first, until my skirts tangled less and my fear untangled more. He taught me gently, never laughing when I stumbled. "You lean too much," he'd say, steadying the reins. "Let the horse trust you, not your weight." "I don't think I know how to be trusted," I'd mutter. "Then learn," he'd say with a ghost of a smile. "You've got time." One evening the sun dipped low and gold over the fields, and I realized I'd been laughing. Real laughter, the kind that didn't feel borrowed. Eli watched me from the fence, arms folded. "You sound different when you laugh," he said. "How so?" Alive. He said it so simply I nearly forgot to breathe. But love, real love, doesn't bloom in straight lines. It sneaks through cracks you thought were permanent. And sometimes it hits when you least expect it. Like that night. We'd been mending the roof of the feed shed before the rains came again. I slipped, not far, but enough to lose footing. He caught me, his arm around my waist, my palms flat against his chest. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us pulsed with something thick, dangerous, human. He exhaled, slow. You all right? Yes. His grip lingered a second too long before he released me. But the imprint of his hand stayed hours after. Later, I found myself at the mirror, brushing out my hair. I hadn't worn it loose since before Calder, before everything. It fell past my shoulders now, soft from weeks of sun and wind. I caught my own reflection and saw someone else. Not a girl traded for debts, not a broken thing. Just a woman standing on her own land, alive under her own name. It was past midnight when he knocked. Lena, his voice called through the door. You awake? My heart stuttered. Yes. He opened it halfway, staying by the threshold. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. Storm's coming again. Just wanted to make sure the window's shut proper. They are. He hesitated. Then, almost quietly, You ever wonder why I didn't send you away? The question caught me off guard. I figured you didn't want to be alone. He smiled faintly. Maybe. But truth is, I didn't want this house to feel empty again. The words sat between us like embers. And then, before I could answer, he tipped his hat and left, leaving my pulse to thunder louder than any storm. Weeks blurred. The ranch turned greener, fuller. So did I. But love stayed a quiet guest, polite, unspoken, sitting just beyond the doorway of what could be. Until one afternoon changed everything. It was branding day, the air thick with smoke and heat. Eli was out by the corral, working with the men. I brought water, passing cups between the hands. When I reached him, sweat darkened his shirt, the fabric clinging to muscle and scars. He took the cup, fingers brushing mine, a simple touch that sent a jolt through me. Thanks, Lena. The way he said my name, like it meant something sacred. Then chaos. A calf broke loose from the pen, charging toward the fence. A young hand tripped in its path. Without thinking, I ran. Eli shouted my name. Too late. The calf's flank slammed into my side, knocking me to the ground. Pain bloomed sharp. The sky spun. By the time I opened my eyes, Eli was kneeling beside me, his hand steady on my shoulder. Stay still, he ordered. Don't move. His voice trembled, the first time I'd heard fear in it. I'm fine, I whispered, though I wasn't sure. He shook his head, jaw tight. You don't scare me like that again, you hear? And before I could answer, he pulled me close, his hand cradling the back of my head, his breath rough against my ear. I can't lose anyone else, he said, voice breaking. The world stopped spinning, because in that moment I knew this wasn't just protection. It was love, quiet, hard-earned, and real. That night, when I woke from the ache in my ribs, I found him asleep in the chair beside my bed, head tilted back, boots still on, guarding me like something precious. And I knew, even if I never bore a child or carried any man's name again, I'd already found what women spend lifetimes praying for, a place to belong. The first thing I heard that morning was Eli's voice, quiet, gravelly, near the window. Stay in bed, Lena. Doc says you need rest. The world was blurry when I blinked. My ribs ached where the calf had struck me. Sunlight painted the room in thin gold stripes. "I'm fine," I murmured. He turned, eyes narrowed under his hat brim. "You're bruised halfway to hell. Don't argue with me." His tone was stern, but his hands, the way they adjusted my blanket, careful and slow, gave him away. Eli Graves wasn't a man who raised his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet carried more weight. I stayed in bed for 2 days. He made sure of it. Fed me soup that tasted of thyme and salt. Sat by the fire at night, reading from one of those old books he pretended not to care about. Once, I caught him glancing at me when he thought I was asleep. His eyes softened in a way that made my chest ache worse than the bruise. He didn't know I saw him, and I didn't let him know that I liked being looked at that way, like I was something whole again. On the 3rd morning, I rose early and found him in the kitchen. He was standing by the stove, sleeves rolled, frying eggs. His hair was still damp from the pump outside, the line of his neck disappearing into his shirt collar. "You cook now?" I teased, leaning against the doorway. He smirked. "Only when someone won't stay put in bed." I walked closer, wincing slightly. He noticed, moved to help, but stopped himself halfway, like he wasn't sure if touching me would heal or harm. "You ever think maybe I'm tougher than I look?" I said. "I know you are," he said quietly. "That's what scares me." Something about the way he said it, like it wasn't just my body he was worried about, made my heart stumble. After breakfast, we rode out to check the north fence. He insisted on saddling my horse for me, though I could have managed. "Still hurts?" he asked, tightening the girth. "Not enough to stop me," I said. "Then don't prove anything today. Just ride." We rode side by side, the wind carrying the smell of rain-soaked soil and grass. I liked the silence between us. It was full, not empty. At one point he said, "You ever think about what you'd do if you weren't here?" I thought about it, then shook my head. This is the first place that's ever felt like mine. He looked at me, long, steady, then turned away. "Good," he said, "because I don't want to imagine this place without you." He said it simply, but I felt the truth of it all the way to my ribs. That afternoon, word came from town. The supply man brought news while Eli was sorting hay. "Sheriff's been asking questions," he said, scratching his beard. "Said Calder's making noise down in Casper. Claims he's coming back to reclaim what's his." I froze. Eli's jaw tightened. He can try. But after the man left, I saw something new in Eli. Not fear exactly. Something heavier. Responsibility. "You're not his," he said finally, turning to me. "No matter what paper he waves in the air. I'll make sure the law knows that." "Eli," he raised a hand. "No, you've been traded enough in this life. Not again." The air between us buzzed, sharp and bright, and for the first time, I didn't look away. That night, rain came again. He stayed up late at his desk, writing letters. One to the sheriff, one to the notary in town. I stood by the doorway, watching the lamplight draw soft lines across his face. "You think he'll come?" I asked. He didn't look up. Men like Calder don't know when they've already lost. "Then what happens if he does?" He paused, then met my eyes. "Then I stand between you and him." Something in his tone made my throat tighten. "You don't have to protect me, Eli." "I know." He leaned back, gaze unwavering. "But I want to." Days later, the town began to whisper. Red Hollow wasn't big, and word about a sold girl living at the Graves Ranch spread fast. I heard it in the way shopkeepers hesitated to meet my eyes, in how the pastor's wife crossed the street when I walked by. Eli heard it too. One evening, after hauling feed into the barn, he said, Don't let their tongues hurt you. They ain't seen enough of the world to know mercy." "I'm used to it," I said. He looked at me sharply. "Don't get used to cruelty, Lena. That's how people die before they're buried." I smiled faintly. "You sound like a preacher." "Never could stomach preaching," he muttered. "Just truth." A few nights later, I woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Eli was already at the door, rifle in hand. Through the window, I saw lantern light bobbing near the fence line. 2 riders, moving slow. He motioned for me to stay inside. I followed anyway. "Lena." "I won't hide," I whispered. He hesitated, then nodded once. We stepped onto the porch together. The night was sharp, moon high and cold. The riders stopped just short of the gate. One of them dismounted, Calder. Even in the dark, I recognized the tilt of his hat, the smug curl of his mouth. "Evening, Graves," he called. "You got something of mine." Eli's voice was calm, deadly quiet. "You sold every inch of this land, Calder. That includes the right to set foot on it." Calder laughed. "I ain't here for land. I'm here for the woman." My stomach twisted. Eli stepped forward. "You'll turn around and ride out, or you won't ride out at all." Calder sneered. "Careful, friend. Law's still law." Eli raised the rifle slightly. "Then let the law hang me for doing what it should have done." The air between them crackled, a gunpowder kind of silence. Calder's hand twitched toward his belt. Eli didn't move, but I did. "Enough!" I shouted. "You don't own me, Calder. You never did." He looked at me, eyes wild. "You think that ranch is going to make you more than what you are? You're barren, girl. You're—" The sound of Eli's gunshot cut through his words like judgment itself. The bullet hit the dirt near Calder's boots. "Next one won't miss," Eli said, voice low. Calder backed up, eyes flashing hate. "You'll regret this," he hissed, then mounted and rode off into the dark. Eli lowered the rifle slowly, breathing hard. "You shouldn't have come out," he muttered. "I wasn't going to watch another man fight for me while I hid inside," I said. He turned to me then, eyes burning. "You think I fight for you? Because you can't? Then why?" He stepped closer until I could feel the heat of his breath. "Because I care, Lena, more than I should." The words hit like thunder. Before I could speak, he turned and walked inside, leaving me alone under the trembling stars. The next morning he was gone early. The men said he'd ridden to town to settle matters with the sheriff. All day I worked like I could scrub the ache out of my chest, washed clothes, swept floors, fed the hens, but the house felt too quiet without him. When he finally returned at dusk, dust clung to his coat, his eyes shadowed. "It's done," he said. "Sheriff confirmed it. Calder's got no claim over you. None." Relief crashed through me, quick, overwhelming. I stepped forward without thinking and wrapped my arms around him. For a second he froze. Then his hands found my back, strong and certain. He didn't kiss me then. He just held me, the way a man does when he's been waiting his whole life to remember what softness feels like. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window, watching the lantern light in the barn flicker. He was still awake, probably fixing something that wasn't broken. I went to him. He looked up as I stepped through the door. "You should be resting." "I couldn't." His brow furrowed. "Something wrong?" "Yes," I said softly. "You keep treating love like a wound instead of a gift." He stared at me, startled. "I've seen how you look at me," I continued, "and I know you think I'm too broken to love back. But you're wrong, Eli. I've just been waiting for someone who saw me as more than a body." He swallowed hard. "Lena." "Don't say my name like it's an apology," I whispered. "Say it like it's a promise." Silence fell, thick, trembling. Then he stepped forward, cupping my face with hands that had built fences and carried pain. "Lena," he said, and kissed me. It wasn't a perfect kiss. It was slow, rough at first, then tender, like learning how to breathe again. When it broke, he rested his forehead against mine. "Didn't plan on this," he murmured. "Me neither." "Then maybe it's what was meant." And for the first time, I believed him.